Welcome everyone to this WiNS seminar talk. I'm happy to introduce the speaker of today, who's Asgari, and she's a PhD at Zurich University. And today she's going to talk about the geography of attention in global science. And as always, Yas will have some time for the talk, like 45 minutes or so, and then there will be time for questions after. You can always write the questions in the chat and I will look at them. But yeah, in the end, there will be time for questions. So I give you the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Elena, for inviting and also hosting this amazing session. I'm really happy actually to share some kind of insights that you know the team that I've been working on and also throughout the years we have found on science of science, and mainly I would like to focus on the geography of attention in global science. As Elena said, I'm also a PhD student at the University of Zurich. I'm affiliated with the Department of Mathematical Modeling and Machine Learning and also with the Digital Society Initiative. So quite like an interdisciplinary setting that I'm working in. Okay, so today I would like to really start talking about what we do as network scientists in science of science. So what we normally do is we go to Scopus, OpenAlex, like different kind of bibliometric databases, and we just retrieve some kind of data. For instance, a paper as we see it here, it's, you can see the titles, authors, their affiliations, and the correspondence, the funding information, and probably we can have access to the abstract of the paper as well. And we just get this information from these sources and we create networks. For instance, what we have done, historically is trying to analyze author-author collaboration networks. For instance, who is going to work with whom, who are the people that have the biggest groups, or who are the people that they collaborate with a diverse set of people. We also talk about the fairness in collaboration and also if there are minorities, majorities, how are people from different um, settings, they collaborate together. We also do a lot of work with the author's affiliation. For instance, we would like to see what happens if different countries they are collaborating together, or if this happens, or if different departments are collaborating together. And this is also a type of network that we really analyze and it's important for us. For instance, a question that we like to answer is there any kind of collaboration patterns that it is in global north, or is it different from the global south? Are they collaborating together or not? Most of the time, we also have access to funding information. So many papers, they say, we thank this agency for this specific project that is funded by this specific country, or multiple kind of acknowledgements. And we knew that which countries are supporting which others from the other countries, and also which agencies are supporting which PIs, like principal investigators. So we also have a sense of funding networks as well. And most of the time, we also have access to the corresponding author. So who has written the most part of the contribution, or who has been leading it. For instance, in this case, this guy, Emmanuel, is the first author and also the corresponding author. And we can see that he's probably the leader of this work. And out of this kind of information, we can create country or other leadership networks. And most of the time, we also have access to the references. And this is a pretty long-standing network called citation networks that people have been studying it like since 1960s, trying to analyze, which papers are getting cited the most. If we have sleeping beauties, like meaning papers that they are going to be explored and understood much years after they are published. And also, what is the key to the success of certain papers? We really want to analyze these kind of settings. But there is like an important question that we can ask, and it's called, what are we really studying in science? And a proxy for understanding what are we really studying, because most of the time we don't have access to the full paper, is the title and the abstract. And this kind of like text, they contain like a rich amount of information that not a lot of people really analyze them. And the reason for it is like very difficult to analyze it in a large scale. Think about you want to analyze millions or like billions of papers. So it's very difficult to have a lot of text to be analyzed and even to store them. But nowadays we have a lot of access to like, machine learning techniques, also a lot of like, storage abilities and other things. So we can go and look deep into these kind of like titles and abstract. So in my work, and in this talk specifically, I'm going to talk about like a term called attention that we can derive from the title and the abstract. And then I'm going to talk about how this attention is related to different sociopolitical events. And we know that like there are other kind of research dynamics like funding and also migration. And we will analyze it together, the relationship between the attention and the funding and scholarly migration to triangulate these specific uh, research dynamics. Okay, what is attention? So attention in a general is about what kind of countries are being studied. Let's look deep into this one paper that we are talking about. So in the abstract of this paper, it's written that they are analyzing Czech Republic, Denmark, Finland, and also like Belgium, Norway, Poland, and Slovenia. So they're analyzing 7 countries. It means the contribution is about these 7 countries. And this kind of like definition comes from like a paper that is published not very far ago, like in 2022. And in this paper in PNAS, they talk about the fact that in social science, most of the papers that are published are about Europe and in general Western countries. And this is called like a concept called Eurocentrism. And they analyze how like different naming practices are existing in social science literature. So we asked ourselves in our group that, okay, what about other disciplines? Can we analyze what's going on in life sciences or in medical sciences or other kinds of like research? So what we did is we also went to Scopus as usual, and we said we would like to have access to 36 million papers that they are published in journals from 2000 to 2022, like quite a long period of time. And we looked into these titles and abstracts, and we found that, interestingly enough, 13% of the papers, roughly around like 5 million articles, they mention a country name. So quite a lot of information that it is under analyzed that we can look deep into it and see which countries are being studied. So then we looked at, what is a percentage of the publications that mention a country in their title or abstract? And we looked into different disciplines, for instance, social sciences, health sciences, physical sciences, and life sciences. And we saw that throughout the time, many more papers are mentioning country names. One kind of like intuition about this kind of like result is generally that it's much easier to collaborate nowadays using online platforms like Zoom, and before that, like using Skype. So I can now like have more access to the local data, local researchers to collaborate with. So I can easily like put more attention toward a certain other countries. And also like there are a lot of data sets available throughout the whole world, and these data sets are increasing more and more, hopefully. So many people get the chance to study their own country or the other countries in the world. So, as we said, more and more research is attributed to certain countries. Now, if we just go and look a bit into sub-disciplines, we can say, okay, specifically sociology and economic sciences, they have a lot of like context specific attention, meaning it's the research about another country. And if we just like look at the physical sciences, we see that it is mostly about like environmental sciences and earth sciences. And if we look into like life sciences, it's a lot about agriculture, knowing about like different settings of producing crops or other things. And also in health sciences is about like nursing, medical science and dentistry and other kinds of like factors. So it means that like different disciplines have different kinds of like attention toward different countries. And then we just like said, can we analyze like which countries are being mentioned? And now we look into their income category using the World Bank classification. What we see consistently is that throughout the whole period of 2000 to 2022, like most of the research is attributed to high income countries, and after that, upper middle class countries. It means that less than 10% of the research in all disciplines is attributed to low income countries and lower middle income countries. So, to conclude my first take home message, we want to say that disparities in science, we know that they exist in collaboration, in funding, and also in scientific mobility, but there is also something more in science. Like countries with less income are studied less, and then they can also study the other countries less. So with this kind of like introduction, we move to the second part of my talk, is we know that the world is changing throughout the time, all the time, like every year, like a lot of events are happening, major diseases are coming by, or like political events are happening. So attention changes from year to year. And we wanted to see if this attention, like, responds to a major sociopolitical event. And we looked deep into all sorts of like sociopolitical events happening after 2000, and we were quite interested in Arab Spring. So for those who don't know what is Arab Spring, I can summarize it a bit. So Arab Spring is a series of pro-democracy uprisings that spread, in the Arab world, mostly in you can see the North Africa and Middle East region. And a lot of like consequences happened within this kind of like major sociopolitical event. And you can see that some countries, they had government overthrows, other ones had some civil wars, and some others, they had governmental changes. And there were also some other countries with less kind of like, severe changes, and they were like mostly major and minor protests. So we wanted to see if there is some sort of a severe, like political event happening, like a government overthrown or like civil war or governmental changes. Does this kind of event bring more attention to the region? So we look deep into 10 countries. As you can see, Morocco, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Kuwait, Bahrain, Yemen, and Oman. And we now go and analyze what's going on within these countries after 2010. So once more, we retrieved some data from Scopus from 2002 to 2019. The reason we didn't go further with after 2019 is because, COVID happened and a lot of things changed. So we didn't want to incorporate the COVID effect. So we saw like a symmetric kind of time frame around 2011 when the Arab Spring happened. And we got roughly around like 25 million papers. And out of these papers, we can see 3.6 million papers, they mention a country. And out of these 3.6 million, 76,000 papers like mention a target country that we are studying, these 10 countries that we would like to study them. So roughly around 2% of the total attention of the whole world goes toward North Africa and Middle East region. And now we create two specific networks. One is called scholarly attention. And this scholarly attention is like I analyze the paper and we find which countries are mentioned. For instance, country A and country B. And now I look at the affiliations and say, who is studying these countries? Now I see, for instance, like Jane and John from two different countries, A and C, are studying these two countries. So when I create like this bipartite network, using fractional counting, I create a network of who is studying whom. And then we look at the acknowledgements and see, okay, for instance, John said, I thank funding agency from country A for supporting this paper. So now country A is supporting a research and funding a research about country A and country B. Once more, I create this bipartite network, and then using fractional counting, I create another funding network. So I have two novel networks that we can analyze it better and better and gain some insights. So what do we see? We see how much attention has increased after the Arab Spring, comparing 2011 to 2019 from 2002 to 2010. And what you can see as like the gray band here is the interquintile range for the whole world. And then also the dashed line is looking at the median, and the mean is showed by this dotted line. And what we see is that attention toward all the countries has increased, but then Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco, and Jordan, they received a lot of attention and even more than median of the world. But there are other countries like, Kuwait and Bahrain. They are very small countries that they receive not a lot of attention. But then we ask ourselves, who is studying these countries? Is it domestic scholarly attention? Meaning, the papers about country X are written by authors that they have affiliations from country X. For instance, Egyptian scholars are researching Egypt itself. And then we have the foreign scholarly attention that, for instance, I'm a researcher in Switzerland. I'm studying like Egypt. So this is kind of like, foreign scholarly attention. So we, separate these two sources. And if I look into the domestic scholarly attention, we say that the government overthrown group like Egypt and Tunisia, they just like, had so much of the like domestic attention. Maybe you ask why, and I can give you a bit of like intuition. Like after the Arab Spring, a lot of like, researchers were willing to like, contribute to their country's future. And they had a sense of like nationalism. They wanted to like help building like better science infrastructure. And also the new government was supporting it better. And, also like the freedom of research also increased, meaning like many research that they were banned from being researched, they have like the chance to being published now. So overall, in the government overthrown group, um, it the domestic attention increased. But then, if we just look into the like civil war group, where like, a lot of like prolonged internal conflicts and violence happened, and many researchers like went out of the country, and there weren't a lot of like funding availabilities, and, there weren't like a stable situation for the researchers to study their own country, the domestic attention didn't really increase. And you see like, it's not a lot of like papers published about Libya, Syria, and Yemen. But then if I just like look on the opposite side, like who else is researching them, we can say that now like the civil war group and the government overthrown group, they are like, increasing, they are receiving a lot of more attention comparing to their domestic attention. So we knew that like there should be an optimal balance between domestic and foreign scholarly attention. Because if one is bigger than the other one, actually there is no such a kind of like sustainable research discourse. And I'm going to point it out later in the discussion as well. And we checked the foreign to domestic attention ratio. And then let's look deep into it. In the government overthrown group, you can see that this value is less than 1, meaning the domestic attention is more than the foreign one. But in the civil war group, actually, it is not the case. It was the foreign one was more than the domestic one, and it grows like much bigger after the Arab Spring. So it means something is going on within these countries. Now we look deep into like different kind of like sub disciplines, and we see a lot of like cool patterns. For instance, let's look into the social sciences. So you can see that like the values for the social science increased a lot, specifically for the like, civil war group, and also like for the other groups as well. But if you are old enough, or maybe if you have read a lot of like computational social science research, I think you can remember that, like, from 2011, many people were discussing what is the role of like Facebook and the other social media on shaping, like, people's political behavior and also political campaigns and protests and so on. So a lot of like researchers, especially abroad, they were like analyzing what's going on because they had a lot of access to the like data that was like you could retrieve from the Twitter, from the Facebook, and other kinds of like social media research. And if we look into the health sciences, health sciences is the core of one country's research. They want to do study like what are the health specific contexts within a certain country. And then you can see that even for the health sciences, like, the researchers in the Civil War group, they uh, they didn't have like a lot of chance uh, to publish about their country. So the value of the foreign to domestic attention ratio increased. And the reason maybe like has different kinds of like intuitions. One thing is about like humanitarian studies. So these countries faced a lot of like, prolonged civil wars and conflicts, and many people lived in like in a specific situation called like a humanitarian crisis. And other types of organization were trying to help, and this is maybe like one of the reasons that foreign health science research is increasing. And also another fact is there that like, if you want to research on health, you should have health databases. And if your country is in the war, you don't have like enough money and also like enough human force to do this kind of like databases. And also something else is like, these are like a lot of like paperwork that you have to do. And within a conflict situation, you cannot really do it. So databases should improve to have more like domestic research, but in civil war situation, you cannot have this kind of um, like attention to your country. And then because of, having more prolonged conflict, there was also more kind of brain drain and many researchers like flew away from the country. So less kind of like health science research. But then if it is like too much of foreign research, who is setting the agenda? Like what can be the risk? And then I would like to say which countries are like giving the top contributions to this kind of like excess attention. And you can see that like USA, UK, Saudi Arabia, Spain, like and France, they are like, the top five contributors to this kind of like more attention to the region. And there is also something else that we should think about that, like, how Saudi Arabia, like in the rank 3, and also Malaysia in the rank 6, have the most excess attention about the target countries. But, we would have expected this kind of like results because, like, if you have, like, in Western countries, we have, you know, more papers published by these researchers. So there is more chance that, like, at least like a few of this research is about the other countries. So what we did is trying to analyze the ranks, meaning if a country was, I don't know, in the rank fifth before the Arab Spring, how did it change after that? So like, did it move to the rank second or did it move to the rank like 100? And we also knew that, if you're in the rank second, moving to the rank one is harder than if you're in the rank 150, moving to the rank like 140, because most of these attention are like in a power law distribution. So if we look now into the rank inertia, we can see that like, Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, UK, Iran, and Qatar are the type 5 contributors. So it means now the impact of the Arab Spring is more noticeable in Islamic countries and regions within the Africa and Middle East. And now that we see Saudi Arabia and Malaysia in both in the absolute number of absolute difference of the attention and also in the rank in Asia, we can say that okay, there is something really have changed within these two countries that they spend more attention toward target countries of our study. So far we showed that the scholarly attention to our target countries has increased, but is it really statistically significant? Um, the general kind of way to answer this question is to use difference in difference. So we wanted to check how the logarithm of the attention has changed after the Arab Spring with controlling, by controlling the variables GDP per capita, population, and the research population. When we just comparing, for example, rest of the world and rest of the MENA. And we do the same thing for the domestic attention and the foreign attention as well. And now I'm going to explain what do we see within the difference in this difference. So we say that the attention has increased statistically significant when we compare it to the rest of the world, meaning Arab Spring probably brought a lot of attention to these target countries. And in the Civil War group, as we mentioned earlier, also once more, significantly, the domestic attention increased less than the others when we compare to the rest of the world. And also the foreign attention, when we compare it to the rest of the world, it has increased more when controlling for the GDP and the population. So the answer to the question that if really the attention to our target countries has increased is yes, specifically toward the total attention and the foreign attention. So let's talk about some sort of take-home messages for the second part of the work. And I would like to mention that domestic research is really important because it can help strengthening the national scientific productivity. You know how much your researchers are producing knowledge about your country, about the challenges that you are facing, and also, building a long-term research capacity. And when there is a foreign attention, it's more about enhancing the visibility of the country. For instance, how much do we know about, I don't know, Kuwait? How much do we know about, I don't know, a country in Africa or Latin America or any countries in the world? This visibility comes from the fact that how much it's being researched by the other researchers. But there is also another important factor that we try to focus on, that if there is an over-reliance of the attention biasing toward the foreign scholars, this can really marginalize local voices, specifically in the global south. And then, if this knowledge is shifted toward, the external forces or temporary forces, that's not quite good because sometimes it's not matching the national priorities of a certain countries. So I would like to refer to a piece written by Mona Abaza. She mentioned that most of the research about Arab Spring, the highly cited ones are coming from American researchers and also a lot of people that they haven't been to any of these countries impacted by the Arab Spring itself. And the local researchers are quite marginalized because they have less funding available. They don't publish also like in good journals and also like not in English. So this can create a lot of like focus on the narratives of the Arab Spring when it's coming from the foreign researchers. So we have to balance between these foreign and domestic attention. For the last piece of the work, I would like to say that funding is also probably an important explanatory factor. How come? So we checked the difference in terms of the attention to, for example, from Saudi Arabia or from any other country to our target countries, and also like how much funding was available from that specific country. And you can see like quite a strong correlation. This value is 0.88 and it's significant. And you can see also that USA, UK, France, Spain, Germany, and Saudi Arabia, they are like, contributing a lot of funding and also quite a lot of like attention as well. And this is the case for the other countries coming after, like Malaysia, Italy, Canada, and Japan. And once more, like Saudi Arabia is a major contributor of funding as well. So a lot of things probably has happened with this country that probably you wouldn't count it as one of the like major uh, players in science, at least before the Arab Spring. And something else that is really important, scholarly migration. I have moved from Iran to France and then to Switzerland. So this is some kind of like the path that like a researcher can take, and it's called scholarly mobility or scholarly migration. So it's also pretty known that when some sort of like changes happen within a country, uh, two kind of like things can happen. So one is that the situation is not really good. So many researchers, they seek opportunities outside their countries. But then there is also something else that when you see there is a change happening to your country, maybe you say, maybe I can come back and contribute my knowledge to my country. So this is like, the context specific within like, the sociopolitical events happening within a country. And then we studied how how is a relationship between a country receiving scholars from a country, as a proxy of how good it is in terms of being an expert about a certain topic. For instance, somebody can hire another researcher coming from Egypt because they think that they can research about the Egypt and also like bring narratives of the Egypt to their institute. So when looking at these two factors, we can see once more like another correlation, and which is quite a high value, once more like 0.72. It says that once more scholarly migration is related to the increase in attention to the target countries. And if we look into who are the most recipients of scholars from the target countries, you can disproportionately see that like, 200, roughly around 250 researchers from these target countries move to Saudi Arabia every year. And then after that, you see USA, UK, Germany, Canada, and the other countries. And once more, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and UAE, because we see them within this plot, are the new attractive like research destinations. They have money. They also like have same language, same religion, same life settings. So probably quite an attractive like place to be for a researcher from our target countries. And we also see that the migration to the Western countries has increased as well. So finally, the take-home message 3 and the end of like my presentation is about the fact that funding and scholarly migration can be explanatory factors of the increased scholarly attention. But there are more factors. It's not only these ones. It's about like geographical proximity, because if I'm a researcher, probably in Mediterranean, I can research other countries probably that we have like a marine border or like a normal border with. Or also it's about the relationship of the trade, specifically when we are talking about agriculture and I don't know the other factors. And then there is like also colonial relationship or like historical colonial relationships or the diplomatic relationships, scientific agreements, and all other settings are contributing a lot to why a certain country can study another country. So I hope I could really motivate you that we can do really a lot with attention. For instance, I don't know, you come from Italy and you want to know who studies Italy, or you have access to the all the research that Italian researchers published, and you want to say, okay, like who uh who we are researching? Like, are we researching like countries within the region, within outside the region, or like, very far from us? Or like, you have access to like a journal and you want to say this specific journal in medical science, is it publishing only when it's the research is about the US and Europe, or is it also publishing about the other countries? And no, a lot of other questions. They're open. If you're interested about, knowing more about our paper, I mean, I didn't really have time to go deep into all the results. There are much more, multifaceted point of view, to this, Arab Spring concept. You can have access through um, this QR code or also throughout my website. And but more than that, I would like to thank all my collaborators. We started this project like around 3 years ago, and yeah, we have been working on quite with like a very difficult time zone issues. Like it's all the time, like people are in China, people are in the US, people are in Hawaii. So it's very difficult to find a time zone that matches all of us. But I think like people coming from like social sciences, political sciences, natural language processing, also computer science, network scientists, like we collaborated really a lot in different aspects of this project. So maybe also for you, if you want to do similar projects, it's always good to have like different points of view. But more than that, I would like to thank like Daniel Acuna and Stefan David, because we were all like participants of a workshop, and then we started this project, and we worked quite a long time to have the results that I'm showing now. And people who provided like the scholarly migration database, and also those people at the Severe who gave us access to the ICSR lab, which is like a very clean data set. And with this, I would like to thank everybody and say, if you have any questions, I would like to now take them.
Thanks a lot for this really nice talk, and let's
Thank
give
you.
a round of virtual applause to Yas. So now if people have questions, please, you can turn on your mic or write it in the chat as you prefer.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, hello,
Hi.
Yasaman. Thank you so much for this talk. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Really, since I'm a researcher based in Tunisia, and so I can based in Tunisia.
Mhm.
And can you hear me?
Yeah, just we had a bit of
Okay.
like
And
issue. Yeah.
okay. And I can really testify, at least qualitatively, to the increase in domestic research that have been witnessing in Tunisia. And as you said, I really think it's one of the main contributing factors is the availability of data.
Yeah.
That was a big change during the Arab Spring. Um, and so I had a question
Mm-hmm.
about the bipartite network of attention
Mm-hmm.
that you can think it would make sense to that looks that's a bit like a paper quantify the attention. And I was wondering whether it would make sense to say that a country receives more attention if it receives attention from countries that receive attention as well. Or do you think that would not make a lot of sense?
So you say a country is receiving more attention. Can you repeat, like, the last part of your question?
Yeah, sure. So I was wondering whether the way you count the attention that a certain country receives,
Mm-hmm.
um, would it make sense to say that if a country X is receiving attention itself, receiving a lot of attention?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I mean your voice was like quite interrupted like in the middle, but I tried to understand the question. You said that like, when we are constructing the network, we could pay attention to the fact that if a country that receives a lot of attention, nowadays, if country X is receiving attention, like, how it is receiving more attention after the Arab Spring. Is that true? I mean, if
No, that was not my question, but I will try to write it in the chat because
yeah,
I
that
think my connection is not so good. So I will try to write it in the chat, and please feel free
amazing.
to take another question in the meantime. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Are there any other questions meanwhile?
So meanwhile, I can
Yeah.
ask some questions.
Yeah.
Hi, hello, nice to see you
Hi.
again. Congratulations for the new work.
Thank you so much.
I have a couple of questions.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sure.
the first question that I was wondering is how you normalize this country attention because publications have different numbers of citation.
Mm-hmm.
You have like different numbers of authors, different number of affiliations, different number of people that are acknowledged.
Mm-hmm.
So you have several layers
Mm-hmm.
of different numbers of
Mm-hmm.
different quantities. So I wonder how did you normalize
Mm-hmm.
like if I have a systematic review, I have a lot of citations. So do you divide the attention per publication, per acknowledgement? So how do you
Mm-hmm.
treat these
Yeah.
other layers of um,
Yeah.
unequal numbers? Yeah.
Yeah. So if I would like to answer this question, I can say that in this work, we didn't pay attention to the citations, which is also an important factor, but we didn't get into like, going through analyzing like if it's an attention from a foreign country or like from a domestic researcher, is it like, same amount of like citations or not? But what we did is, for instance, we have different countries here. Like, for example, Jane is coming from like countries A and C, or like, John is coming from C, or it can be like a list of countries. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, and then like, there are two countries here that they are mentioned. What we made sure is to use fractional counting. What do I mean by that? Is that all these edges in this specific like network, when I'm trying to like collapse it into a normal network, a normal like directed network, I make sure that one paper is like distributed among these edges. Meaning if I like, sum over all these like edges here in this bipartite network, and here it sums to one. And the reason for it is like, because you mentioned, like, it can be like reviews with hundreds of people or works written by like, medical researchers that they tend to have like many researchers, like 20 people, 30 people. Or like sometimes like there are so many countries like mentioned in a country in a paper. So like we could really like renormalize it in a fact with the fact that like one paper is one paper, and we should use like fractional counting. That's my answer to it. And yeah, and about the funding, it's also the case. Like if they are acknowledging like funding from a certain other countries, uh, we make sure that all the edges in this bipartite network, when we are collapsing the network, it's going to sum to one because it's one paper. I hope I could answer your question.
Yes, thank you so much. So I was also wondering like about the representation, right? Because some countries you have higher population, less population, more
Yeah.
universities, less universities.
Yeah, that's true.
So you also normalize from that,
So
or you control?
I controlled for it. I didn't
Okay.
like, normalize it for it, but I
Okay.
controlled for it. You see, yeah, because for instance, if we have more population for a certain country, probably a lot of more research is going toward that country. Like, it's an important factor. Like if Switzerland has like 10 million people living in, or like India with 1 billion. So we would guess that like, there are more research about like India because there's more like of the people living there. And also like with regard to the fact that like number of institutions and also number of researchers, we control for the number of researchers because they are the workforce of this research, specifically for the domestic research. So that's why we controlled for the like the research population. So like the number of researchers.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. So then I would like to go for Hager's questions. It says, do you think it would make sense to compute the attention score in a way that takes into account the attention score of the country giving the attention? If the X is receiving attention from a country itself, receiving a lot of attention, that would increase the score. I think I didn't show it, but I think in the paper we do something like analyzing the attention. I think so. Yeah, it's very similar to the eigen in the centrality of the network here. But I didn't analyze this, but analyze something else. So when we try to explain why certain countries are giving attention to these target countries, we said, okay, like these countries that they gave a lot of attention to the all other countries in the world, probably they give like attention to the target countries as well. And that's true. It means if you research all over the world, like USA, like Europe, that they research about like, Middle East, like Asia, Latin America, and the other countries in Africa, especially Sub-Saharan Africa, they also tend to have a lot of research about like the target countries because they have, this kind of like workforce to analyze other countries as well. But I write it down because I think it's a good factor that I can analyze in the next works. Sure, thank you so much. And also, once more, like if you're interested about like, how to like do this about your country, we have also published the data set with this paper. You can find it on an archive, and then you can go through like, select the country of your interest and see like which countries are in, for instance, like studying, I don't know, like Iran, or which countries Iran is studying, like, or any other country. Yeah. Any other questions?
Super nice. Thanks for the really nice talk. I had a question which is quite briefly also
Yeah.
brief also because we are a bit over time. But I saw in your last slide that you mentioned a migration data set, because my
Yeah.
question was, how do you measure
Yeah.
that the author migrated?
Yeah. So, I mean, there is like a database called Scholarly Migration Database. It's a very well curated, like, data that it is publicly available. And there are many works from this group explaining different factors about, like, uh, different countries, like, global south, global north. Like, I think I would like to point out that they did an amazing job understanding which like researchers moved from like which countries to another ones. So yeah, so I'm not part of the team, but like they have done an amazing job. I hope they also like can enjoy like the access to this amazing data set as well.
Okay, super nice. Thanks. Thanks a lot for the talk.
Sure, thank you so much once more.
And
Thank you.
see you next week for the next seminar. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.